Why are there no plus plus and operators in Python? Why are there no plus plus and operators in Python?
It's not because it doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense to define x plus plus s, x plus equals 1, evaluating to the previous binding of x. If you want to know the original reason, you'll have to either wade through all Python mailing lists or ask somebody who was there, e.g. Guido, but it's easy enough to justify after the fact. Simple increment and decrement aren't needed as much as in other languages. You don't write things like for int I equals 0, I is lower than 10, plus plus I, in Python very often. Instead you do things like for I in range 0, 10. Since it's not needed nearly as often, there's much less reason to give it its own special syntax. When you do need to increment, plus equals is usually just fine. It's not a decision of whether it makes sense, or whether it can be done. It does, and it can. It's a question of whether the benefit is worth adding to the core syntax of the language. Remember, this is for operators post-inc, post-dec, pre-inc, pre-dec, and each of these would need to have its own class overloads. They all need to be specified and tested. It would add opcodes to the language, implying a larger, and therefore slower, VM engine. Every class that supports a logical increment would need to implement them on top of plus equals and dash smiley face. This is all redundant with plus equals and dash equals, so it would become a net loss.
This original answer I wrote is a myth from the folklore of computing, debunked by Dennis Ritchie as historically impossible, as noted in the letters to the editors of communications of the ACM, July 2012 doi. 10.1145, a 2209249.2209251. The C increment and decrement operators were invented at a time when the C compiler wasn't very smart, and the authors wanted to be able to specify the direct intent that a machine language operator should be used, which saved a handful of cycles for a compiler which might do A instead of. And the PDP-11 even supported auto-increment and auto-increment deferred instructions corresponding to *++p and *p++, respectively. See section 5.3 of the manual if horribly curious. As compilers are smart enough to handle the high-level optimization tricks built into the syntax of C, they are just a syntactic convenience now. Python doesn't have tricks to convey intentions to the assembler because it doesn't use one.
Because, in Python, integers are immutable, ints plus equals actually returns a different object. Also, with ++/, you need to worry about pre versus post, increment/decrement, and it takes only one more keystroke to write x plus equals 1. In other words, it avoids potential confusion at the expense of very little gain.
Of course, we could say, Guido just decided that way, but I think the question is really about the reasons for that decision. I think there are several reasons. It mixes together statements and expressions, which is not good practice. See, this URL. It generally encourages people to write less readable code. Extra complexity in the language implementation, which is unnecessary in Python, as already mentioned.
If you want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing.